Diane Nelson. I'm a member of the Rockaway Valley Garden Club. I'd like to tell you about a proposal that our garden club and the Garden Club of Mountain Lakes have recently made to the Morris County Park Commission. We have asked that the Tourne Park, this park which we all love here in Denville and Boonton Township and Mountain Lakes, be expanded to include area in the Rockaway Valley. The area that we have requested be added to the Tourne Park is adjacent to Bush Road, and it goes all the way down to the Boonton Township boundary. Near the Boonton Township boundary in Boonton is the Boonton well field. Down the opposite end along the Rockaway River, near the Rockaway River Country Club, are the wells in Mountain Lakes, the Mountain Lakes well field. This area is basically a farm area, but because of development pressures, this is not going to stay in farming unless a lot of people get together and work to keep it this way. We feel that by keeping this area in open space and by adding it to the Tourne Park, we can stabilize this particular section of the Rockaway Valley, and it will be much easier for the other areas that are now in farming to remain in farming. But there are other reasons we want this area to be added to the Tourne Park. This whole area is an aquifer recharge area. It's important to the town of Boonton because of its water supply. It's also important to the Mountain Lakes well system if they ever are required to use these wells again. But in addition to the groundwater, it's also important to keep this area open because of the serious downstream flooding that occurs very frequently in Lake Hiawatha and other areas. This is really a great area for holding water. The water seeps into the soil. It doesn't run off into the river. It recharges our wells. It provides water for many different assets. In addition to the environmental goals of the project, which are groundwater protection, stream buffer along the Rockaway River, wetland protection, protection of prime agricultural soils, the protection of a section of the Morris Canal, and also the wildlife habitat that exists along the river and in the wetlands, we have some really great opportunities for recreational assets. Since the land is so flat in a good part of the area, and it is prime agricultural soils, it would be ideal for community gardening. This is a kind of recreation in Morris County that is extremely popular, but would be rather impossible to develop at the Tourne Park. In fact, most of the county parks aren't suitable for gardening, community gardening. And I know that the Park Commission is interested in offering this as one of their recreational benefits. In addition, the field sports, access to the Rockaway River for canoeing, a picnic grove along the river, hiking along the old towpath, also natural areas. Bird watching, believe it or not, is one of the most popular pursuits in New Jersey for recreation. It's becoming more popular every year, and certainly the Rockaway River is a beautiful habitat for birds. I've seen the great blue heron there myself and some other very interesting birds, water birds. Trout. The river is stocked with trout. It's a great fishing area. In the winter, it would be good for cross-country skiing, and also the possibility for a golf or an ice skating in the old Morris Canal or even in the Rockaway River. So there are many, many different recreational benefits. If we were to classify this project recreational or environmental, we'd find it a little difficult because it offers so many benefits of both environmental and recreational in nature. We've gotten a lot of support. We've gone to people, we've gone to organizations. We've been very gratified in receiving municipal support, support from other garden clubs, from environmental organizations, and we are asking people, if they are interested in helping this project, to please write to the Morris County Board of Freeholders asking them to support the Morris County Park Commission in their recommendation that the park be expanded, which we hope that they will make sometime in the near future.
Okay, now we'd like to hear from Dean Gallo on this subject. Dean Gallo is a former Morris County freeholder and is now a state assembly leader, and we want to thank you for coming up this evening to talk about the saving the Rockaway Valley. And I guess the first thing we could ask is, you being the type of person who has a good fix on Morris County and all its issues and activities, how do you feel about the situation as it's been presented?
Well, I had a long discussion with Diane Nelson back maybe a month ago regarding this particular project that they were getting involved in, and that was to save about 75 acres those acres that were contiguous to the Tourne. And it made a great deal of sense to me. In my background in the Morris County Board of Freeholders and as its director, I've always been very supportive of the Park Commission and land acquisition. And it's, once this land is gone, it's not going to be retrieved again. So I felt very strongly that the proposal that Diane and her group were putting together made a great deal of sense. The Tourne is a county park. The parklands itself would be contiguous. It would add 75 acres to an existing park. We are going to need additional recreation, both passive and active. And at the same time, I think the Park Commission has utilized a number of different things along with the need for parks per se. When you look at a park, there are obviously more than just the recreational aspects and also more than just the passive aspects to a park. I mean, it preserves the trees, it preserves the ground from erosion and things of that nature. Plus the fact it's been a good retention area and an area which allows for water to go back into the aquifer. So wrapping all those three things together, this 75 acres seems like a wise investment that the county, along with probably the state of New Jersey under the Green Acres program, could bring about. And I'm sure, for the most part, when we have any type of referendum dealing with the parks, there's always been a very positive response by the citizens of this county. And I'm very pleased with our park systems as they stand today. I think they're the finest in the state. They have good administration, and that was a legacy left by our director, Russ Myers, who is now with the state. So I'm very pro this project, and I have been pro parks and recreation within this county for a long time.
Okay, as far as the area in question being an aquifer area, the Rockaway River runs by there, the Booton well fields are located there, the Mountain Lake well fields are located nearby. Obviously it is an aquifer area, and as far as that's concerned, what do you feel the effect would be on not preserving this area? Or how do you feel about that being a sensitive aquifer area?
Well, right now I think that's what makes this program unique, because we're dealing with more than just, as I said before, the recreational aspects of it. With the Rockaway River in close proximity to the tract of land, and the fact that it has well fields within its close proximity of the land, it is a super sensitive area to protect. And I think that we don't have to go too far when we look at Rockaway Township and see some of the significant problems that they're having, and not because of anything they've done, but because of contamination that has, as a result of industries, have put their well fields in great jeopardy, and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars right now to make sure that that water is purified. It's a concern when we look at the overall aspect of protecting our water and the aquifer, which is so important, that when looking for funding, you have a much better chance of getting that necessary funding from the state agencies, along with county support, when you meet the different criteria that is broad in base. And here I'm saying you have a recreational use, both active and passive that it could be. You have the water aquifer that would be protected. You have the aspect of keeping an area environmentally free. And at the same time, we've had flooding. And although this might not help in any way to avoid that flooding, it certainly doesn't add to the flooding problems. And if that property is allowed to be sold or developed, then you're dealing with additional runoff, which does add to the problems of flooding and, for that matter, pollution, depending on the amount of runoff and the amount of development. So I just happen to think this is a project that's not that big that the freeholders and the state could not work out a means to bring this as part of the overall park system. And I have indicated to Diane Nelson that I would certainly speak with freeholders and do what I feel is necessary on a state level to get some people excited about this program. It boils down to one thing, though. It boils down to public interest, public involvement, and public acceptance. I think with Diane and her group and other groups throughout this county, you're going to find the kind of momentum that's necessary to bring about a satisfactory conclusion to this overall acquisition. As I indicated before, I've told Diane that I would certainly work within my parameters as a state legislator and also as a county resident for 42 years to bring about this worthy project.
Roman is an expert in soils. He works for Morris County, and he's very active now in trying to protect agricultural lands. Les, can you tell us a little bit about these rich agricultural soils we're standing near? And
what we have here, Diane, is something very unique to this part of the county. There's very, very little agricultural land left, and this represents some of the finest agricultural land that we have left in this part of Morris County. Typically, when you think of agriculture in Morris County, you think of Washington Valley and Chester and Mendham Township and so on and so forth. However, in this Boonton Township Valley, extending from St. Clair's Church up to Oscar Kincaid's farm at the end of the valley, there's some very fine agricultural land that we feel is definitely worth preserving.
Agricultural land, of course, is open space, and open space is really what we're all trying to preserve here in the Rockaway Valley. And by preserving farmland, we can preserve the same aesthetics and areas of interest that we're talking about in Green Acres as well, is if we keep it in farmland.
Well, you know, you say keeping it in farmland. We now are very fortunate that we are extremely close in the state of New Jersey and in Morris County to having a mechanism by which we can preserve farmland, wherein money is available from the state, and we hope soon that money will be available from the county to acquire the development easements on farmlands, wherein a farmer can actually sell the development rights to his farm and retain the farm, can continue to farm, he or another farmer or an heir can farm, and the land can then stay in productive agriculture. Now, when we view some of the development proposals that are currently being presented in this valley, we feel that this provides an alternative where the farmer can still derive a profit from his land and not have to sell it.
That's really...
And it's very important. And not only do we preserve the farmland, but we preserve the surrounding ecology, such as the Rockaway River and the associated wetlands and the woodlands associated with the Tourne, and even the little areas like this right along the roadside where you have wildflowers growing and some birds nesting and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So it's not just agriculture, it's the whole picture that's important.
Yes. Well, I know you are from Boonton, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you feel personally about Tourne Park and keeping the Rockaway Valley green.
Well, it's very, on a personal level, it's very important to me. I grew up in the Tourne. I used to come up with my grandfather, who came from Holland to this area, and he had a baker shop in Boonton, and used to fish for trout, native trout, in the Rockaway River, and would bring me to the Tourne when I was just a little tyke, before it was the county park. And it's just a very special area here, and I think it's very important to a lot of us here. And we don't object to people building houses so much, but there's so much of that going on everywhere else in the county that we feel there are little oases like this Boonton Township Valley should, if at all possible, be preserved. We're not trying to keep people out. We're not trying to keep people from having homes and from deriving a living from the construction of those homes and so on and so forth. But there are plenty of places better suited for that. We have such little valuable farmland left like this, and such little wooded lands like the Tourne, and Lord knows the wetlands are under a lot of stress. There are better places to do those things than right here in this valley.
Especially when it means your water supply, too, in Boonton.
Well, we have the wells just right down the road, and they're shallow wells, and aquifers are very complex things that are very poorly understood. But let's face it, if you put asphalt on top of your aquifer, the water from the heavens is not going to get into the ground so that we can fill our cups in Boonton. And also with urban development, there's a great deal of associated pollution that comes with that, not only during construction, where there's enormous amounts of soil erosion which take place due to the massive amounts of earth disruption which would reach the river and impact the river that's already been impacted in many, many ways. But with that urban runoff then seeping into the ground and possibly entering the aquifer. We hear so much these days about toxic pollution entering the aquifer. That maybe is not the issue here. However, you do have contaminants, petroleum from the cars and asbestos from the cars, and then there are the herbicides and pesticides that people put on their lawns and their roses and so on and so forth, which also can reach the aquifer. So the issue here is it's not just the preservation of pretty land, but it's the municipal distribution system of water supply, which is absolutely fundamental. If the people in Boonton don't have the water, what do you do? It's the old story that the farmer doesn't miss his well until it goes dry. And we certainly don't want to see that happen here.
That's so true. Well, Les, thank you so much for coming by and giving us your thoughts on this very